What motivates you?
Positive environment that moves people forward.
What would cause you to have a bad day? What resources do you need to do your job effectively?
Not consistent. If they're not looking out for your well-being, if they're not a trustworthy adult, there can't be trust and you can't have.
What that does to a school like yours. And you also have to manage a workplace with employees. How the hell did you get through it?
What that did in the long run is it took kids that were struggling socially and emotionally. How do you manage your own emotions and feelings?
Matty, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
So you're the executive director at Serendipity Center, and you and I go way back. You used to work for Xenium. Talk about that story. Like, how did you land at Serendipity Center? And just, I just want to hear that.
Yeah, it was quite the journey. I was working for another client of Xenium's, a large kind of chain of athletic clubs in the Portland metro area, and they had a sudden, unexpected organizational change. And I had developed over my time working with Xenium such strong relationships with the people I was working with there, that when that change happened, it was just a natural transition for me to think about joining that team. And I did. I became an on-site with Xenium, and I interviewed at a couple of different nonprofits before landing an interview with Serendipity and just absolutely falling in love with their mission and the staff and the kids that they served. And it was just such an alignment of my values and their values that it became pretty clear over a short amount of time that was really where I belonged, and ended up becoming their full-time HR manager about 6 months after that. And I always talk about how I'm the dummy that keeps raising my hand every time there was a need that was there. I just said, well, I could learn that. I could do that. And 13 years later, here I am as director. And yeah, I'm thrilled. I've learned so much in my career and in just as a person working in this agency. And man, I wish I would have learned a lot of the lessons earlier on in my career. I mean, I did the math. I've been supervising people for 30 years. I just started right out of high school. And yeah, the things that I've learned here has really impacted the way I look at people, the way I look at a workplace and my own leadership.
Did you ever have aspirations of working for a nonprofit, or was this just like perfect timing with like what you needed out of your life?
Yeah, I don't know. I always had a value to give back and a value to do work that was meaningful in some sort of way, but I never found myself in those situations. I never, and you know, that all of us have our own personal histories, right? I had a pretty rough upbringing, and part of the result of that is you don't really dream a lot. You kind of focus on today and you kind of knuckle down and do what you have. Yep. And I don't think it was until I was suddenly in this situation where I realized, no, wait a minute, I can do this. I can contribute in this way. I have skills. I have knowledge. I have wisdom that I can contribute to this mission. And then it wasn't until I was sitting in Serendipity's first graduation ceremony, the first year that I was there, where I thought to myself, this is where I want to retire. I want to do this work.
Well, you talked about the mission of Serendipity Center. You mentioned graduation. Let's let listeners in on what is Serendipity Center? What is the mission? Just so people know the background of what organization you serve.
Serendipity Center is a therapeutic school in the Portland metro area that acts as an extension of school districts. We're not affiliated with any school district, but when a student exhausts all the resources that a school district can provide, then they look for outside placements. And we are a placement that focuses on a combination of mental health services, special education supports, transition readiness, and wellness. So those are our four pillars. But really, we are referred students that just don't have the tools yet to succeed in public schools, whether that be from a social emotional place, whether that be from just coping, whether that be educational or neurological difference, or a combination of all of those things. They just have not been able to find success in public schools. So they come to us, and we do everything we can to wrap our services around them and figure out what success looks like for them, figure out where those tools have gone hinky, and try and offer them alternatives, or make sense of their own frustrations, and learn how to move forward. And a lot of times it really starts with emotional stabilization and learning how to self-regulate.
Yep.
Because a lot of times, if you experience multiple failures and you experience an array of trauma, school has not been a happy place for these kids. So they come in with their guards up. They come in physically with their guards up. And a lot of times the only response that these kids have to that frustration and failure is physical aggression or verbal aggression. So we do our best to just kind of, steady ourselves and help those kids make sense of what they're going through and choose different paths forward.
That's super powerful. I mean, I told you this before we started recording today, and I told you before, like I have a kid that has mental health issues, and school is often a trigger for bringing out that emotional deregulation. And so, of course, like all the work that we do is on the emotional regulation side. So what you're doing is incredible work, and it takes a special type of person. You're at the executive director level, but I'm sure you're trying to find people who also like really care about the work that they do. So like talk about that. Like what kinds of people are you bringing in the organization that like see the mission the way you do?
Yeah, I mean, there's all types. I mean, I always relate the adults that work for us to kind of the kids that work for us, because everyone comes in with their own history. Everyone comes in with their own filter that they view the world through based on their education, their experiences, and all of that. We tend to get folks that have experienced some sort of challenge themselves, and have learned how to overcome that. Maybe they were in special education services themselves, and then they kind of had those positive adults intervene and those systems of care that helped them overcome, and now they are a special education teacher. Or maybe they have really focused on mental health and they became a social worker, where they care about contributing to making people's lives better. Sometimes they come with a lot of skills, and sometimes they just come with a lot of heart. And so one of the things we talk about with our kids is kids will do well if they can, and sometimes they just need additional tools. I really believe that adults will do well if they can.
100%.
And adults are just better rehearsed kids. So sometimes they have learned those skills to give them the tools that they need, and sometimes they've developed maladaptive skills that have just made it so that they are dealing with adult realities in a way that isn't totally productive. And sometimes as employers, we have to figure out how to reshape those skills for them too. So yeah.
I love what you said about like students and adults who will do the best that they can if they have the right tools and the right support. And I know, like, as a job as a leader, I often boil it down to like, you're trying to remove barriers for people. You're trying to give them the resources they need and to have like a frictionless experience, and they will do the best that they can. What are some of those things that you've implemented at Serendipity Center to make sure that your people are getting what they need so they can keep the kids at the center of the mission and their work?
Yeah. So Serendipity is a trauma-informed agency, right? So we think about this with our kids, and I keep making these parallels because to me, coming from the outside, it was so immediately apparent when I started to learn about the mission and what we do for kids, and just my HR brain and like working in workplaces with good bosses and bad bosses and structures and systems that were helpful and harmful as an employee. I had to think of it in this way. So trauma-informed agencies, a couple of things you just have to do to be trauma-informed. You have to realize the widespread impact of trauma. And if we're thinking about this from a workplace perspective, the world has happened to us over the last 5 years, many years. Like no matter who you are, you have been impacted by the pandemic, by political instability, by all of the ways that those things kind of trickle down into your own personal life and home based on the stress that we feel those impact our relationships, our habits, our livelihood. So as an employer, I'm trying to figure out how to be a trauma informed employer. So like recognizing that trauma has been experienced, the world has happened to us. Recognizing the signs and symptoms of that in people like we do in our students. You know, they have their maladaptive behaviors, they have their coping strategies. So do adults. They avoid things that are hard. They procrastinate.
Yeah.
They get passive aggressive when things are tough. And so as a leader, you have to kind of figure out, okay, what are the systems here that are making that possible, that are allowing those behaviors, and how do I kind of take the lead in dismantling some of those things and kind of focusing on the things that I know as a trauma informed agency with kids. What can I do as a grown up in the room to try and make it easier for the grown ups so that those barriers are removed so that they can do their best work with kids? And some of the things I focus on uh, with kids, we have to focus on safety, physical and emotional safety. That's priority one. So if I relate that to adults, what are the things that make them feel emotionally unsafe? You know, unpredictability with their boss. Like, are they going to get the same person day to day based on their stress level? And that kind of boils into trust. You know, we know that with these kids, you can't do therapeutic work without trust, and trust is built over time.
Yes, it is.
Consistency. You know, you can't, let me back up. With kids that have experienced trauma, and now we know that the whole world has experienced trauma, there is an intrinsic mistrust with people because you have to be on your guard. I think in the workplace, that's also true of employees versus bosses. There's just this systemic like mistrust because there's a hierarchical thing that you are subject to these other people. There's a power dynamic. And so if this person up here is not consistent, if they're not looking out for your well-being, if they're not a trustworthy adult, there can't be trust, and you can't have that positive environment that moves people forward. So another thing that builds trust from a workplace perspective is making sure that tasks are clear, making sure expectations are clear, making sure that you maintain appropriate boundaries,
Yeah.
and that can look different based on whatever workplace you're in. And I think that doesn't mean not being a human at work. I think that means being a trustworthy human who is not over inserting yourself into people's lives, but also just making sure that there are the supports and systems that they need to be successful. Um, Another one is choice. We talk about at school student voice, and when there are kids that come in with a lot of difficulties in education, maybe presenting them with a math worksheet is going to make them flip a table.
Oh,
literally,
100%.
figuratively. Yeah.
I deal with that at home.
Yeah, so do I. And for adults, it's true too. Like if you're just kind of voluntolding people to do things,
Yep.
and they don't necessarily have the experience or competence yet to do those things, they can feel set up to fail. So I think offering choice and control to employees whenever appropriate and possible is really, really important.
Yeah.
So maybe that's, you're sitting down with a supervision conversation with someone and you're developing a personal development plan for them. Maybe you as their supervisor have an idea of what you want this person to do. Maybe that doesn't align at all with what they want. So understanding their motivations, their needs, their insecurities, any of those things, and providing the tools and choice for them to be able to progress is really, really important. Along with that, collaboration. With our kids, we really work to get to a place where we can collaborate with them, and we can't do that when they're in active trauma, when their lids are flipped, when their rational brain is gone. It's not a time to be saying like, "You seem upset. Would you like this or this?" Similarly with our employees, they've been through so much, and specifically at Serendipity, they're kind of in vicarious trauma with kids all day long. So whenever possible, sharing power, including people in decision making, including them in the information about what is actually going on in the organization, so they feel like there's no surprises, there's no gatekeeping of information, there's no us versus them, is really hard to achieve. but it's a worthwhile effort. So collaboration, sharing power, working with people rather than against them. And then empowerment, like ultimately with our kids, we want to give them the tools so that they can make good choices for themselves and be empowered to not stay at Serendipity, go back to their home communities and live in their best self there. Same for our employees. We have to do this work through people.
Mm-hmm.
And so giving them all the tools and resources, empowering them to learn and progress is something that I kind of hold really, really, really dear.
It's wild how many parallels there are to what you're doing at Serendipity with the therapeutic school to the workplace. And I think of like, both my kids are in public education. It's not going well for one of my kids. In public education, no knock on it. It's the system that is available to us, and I'm thankful for those resources, but it is a one size fits all. And often kids who are a little bit challenged get lost because they don't have the extra resources or the tailored education plan. I mean, some of them can, like IEPs and things of that nature. And I think of like how many kids struggle in that system because we're trying to do everything the same in a systematic approach. The workplace is no different. I think a lot of employers are missing the opportunity to, especially managers. I mean, that manager level is so important to be able to like really connect at a deeper level with their employees and to figure out like what motivates you, what would cause you to have a bad day, what resources do you need to do your job effectively, is there any additional training and resources I could provide you? And by the way, everybody goes home to something different, and so there may be things going on in your life I'll never understand, but what could I help support you with to emotionally regulate you while you're working here?
Schools have what's called a multi-tier system of support, or like MTSS. So basically on a 3-tiered system. So there's tier 1, which is like all the supports that every single student gets when they walk in the door. So mindful teachers, lesson plans, structure, transitions listed on the board, and that is something that as a workplace, most of your employees are going to be able, well, maybe not most, but hopefully most of your employees will be able to walk in and like understand that there's a system that work operates in, and there's basic rules like you must clock in to get paid, you must not hit people in the office, please use kind language with folks. So there's these supports and these systems, an employee handbook. Here you go. Like you are going to read this. You did sign that you read this. So so there's this tier 1 supports, for lack of a better term, in the workplace and in schools. Tier 2 is when you identify that kids may be struggling in a certain way. So like there's a child that who knows what they're walking in the door with, but you notice that they're wiggling in their chair. Then you notice that they haven't come to school with a jacket and it's really cold outside, or there are these things that are going on that as a trustworthy adult you kind of key in on and say, okay, there might be some additional supports that this student needs. Maybe they talk too much with their peers, so we're going to think about a seating chart that gets them closer to the teacher. So like that's a tier 2 support. Tier 3 supports are when like there's kids that have really deeper things going on, and maybe this is just a neurological difference, maybe this is a cognitive difference, maybe this is trauma at home or something going on where the behaviors are really big. They have some maladaptive behaviors going on, like maybe they're spitting on people, and that is like a pretty aggressive behavior, but that behavior is serving a purpose for something. Maybe they don't feel with people getting close to them, so they spit, and that effectively gets people away from them. So that's something that they have learned to do, which isn't necessarily good, and will not serve them as an adult, but does get the thing accomplished. Grown-ups are the same way. We have our own things. Like, you ever see a person walk into the office with earbuds in and they just do not want to talk to people? They want to stick to themselves, just listen to their podcast. Maybe this one.
Maybe.
They just avoid connecting with people. And that might not serve them well overall, but it is serving their need in the moment. So we think of it that way. Serendipity students have exhausted all of those tiers. And so our tier 1 student are those tier for students
Wow.
at public
Yeah.
schools. So every single student is dealing with something big. And we even have a tiered system here. So our tier 3 students are like, we're like bracing ourselves and like saying, what can we do different today to help this kid be effective? I don't think it's much difference in the workplace. I think we have those employees that are, for lack of a better term, magnets for chaos and drama in their own lives to no fault of their own. We've all known them, that they have like something going on that's just terrible all the time, and they might need a bunch of different resources. They might need the EAP referred to them 100 times. They might take up a lot of your time, but the reality is seldom, if ever, in now 30 years of supervising people, have I experienced someone that wakes up in the morning and says, I'm just going to go in there and screw things up for people today.
Nobody says
I'm
that.
really going to mess it up.
Only narcissistic people probably do that.
Yeah, and there are some.
Yeah,
There are some.
for sure.
But truly, like, people deserve our best effort to give them the tools to be successful. And that is a lot of work.
It is.
It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time and intention and care and consistency. And it's not for the faint of heart.
No. Well, this next question is very multi-layered because, as you said earlier, the last 5 years have just happened to us. And I could not even imagine when we went into lockdown 5 years ago, what that does to a school like yours. Because you're dealing with kids who are already, like you said, at that tier 4, and you also have to manage a workplace with employees. How the hell did you get through it? Like, I tell me, like, walk me through, like, day one, what you can't shut down, right? You got to keep.
Yeah.
So tell me what happened.
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, a lot of folks, bless their hearts, learned how to make sourdough and took up crochet and all of these things. I was in this office every single day trying to figure out, okay, what devices do I need to get to students? Okay, those devices got broken because, all of these folks are that. And this is not true of all of our families or students, but a lot of our families and students traditionally have had not as many advantages.
Right.
Okay. So coming to Serendipity, a place where there are consistent adults every single day, where there are free breakfast and lunch every single day, where there's some predictability and there's routine, is really, really important. And suddenly you take that away. And so now we had to figure out, for a special education small nonprofit school who was doing a lot of things with paper and crayons and like fidgets, to shift completely to be remote technology-based learning for a year and a half, because we were closed for a year and a half, was so disruptive.
Yeah.
And because we know that the work that we do with our students is based in relationship and therapeutic rapport, it is so hard to develop relationship and trust over a screen. Now, our staff were heroic. We had behavioral interventionists that were driving iPads out to houses, every other week, because they would end up in a storm drain, or they would end up broken against a coffee table, or they would just go missing. We would have case managers delivering food and resources to families.
That is heroic.
They were. Ooh, I'm going to get emotional.
Please do.
But they did the work, and from my standpoint, I was trying to figure out, okay, what resources do we have that we can use to shift the whole way that we deliver services, and just really trying to get through to when we can open back up. And then opening back up was also a challenge. We had this 47-page document from the state of Oregon saying this is your operational blueprint for what you need to have in place before you can bring people back. And I'm not even kidding. It was just figuring out the ways to get the resources to do all the things. And it was a big effort. And so what that did in the long run is it took kids that were struggling socially and emotionally, were already struggling to deal with how do they behave in location with other peers, and then take them out of that for a year and a half. and then bring them all back after everyone has experienced trauma. It has been a challenging few years post-pandemic. And the pandemic also just kind of decimated people in mental health and education. They just
Absolutely.
were so burned out. So it's been a long kind of steady, slow progress to building back, steady, slow progress to getting our systems in place, to getting traction back with students that just experienced that loss. Yeah, it's just been
fair to say you're maybe in a time of healing, or
yeah, I think stabilization.
yeah,
Okay, so
better way
so
to
we
say it.
think of we think of this with our kids too. I'm always relating it back to our kids. So there's a couple of different phases that our kids go through. When they come to Serendipity, it is really focused on stabilization, because at that point they've experienced failure, they have all of the things going on for them, and so we work with just understanding, helping them make sense of, and stabilizing the behavior and stabilizing the environment for them. You can't really get to healing until you can get calm. And we know that from our brain, right? Right? When you go into fight, flight, freeze, you are just thinking about, where is the danger? What am I going to do? You are not thinking about, here's like an analogy. You're washing dishes at home. Your keys fall and they hit a metal like side of your dishwasher, and you go, huh? What was that noise? So process is, what is that noise? Oh, those were keys. You don't get to, I'm going to put my keys farther on the counter so I don't knock them down yet, until you are calm, until you assess the danger, until you understand what's going on. Similarly for our kids, they've experienced so much trauma and all of that, that when they get here, it's really focusing on stabilization. How do you behave in this classroom? How do we develop the alternative things for you when you start to experience that trauma again, or you start to experience that frustration tolerance? Relating it to our employees, they all experienced that trauma as well. So how do we get back and deal with people? How do you respond the first time a kid won't wear a mask and starts coughing in your classroom after a global pandemic? How do you manage your own emotions and feelings? Like, what do you do when that first student spits at you, like after a global pandemic? So it has been really a long phase of stabilizing and rebuilding. And now we're getting to a place where we're like, okay, the dust has settled. Where do we have to put some structure back in place? Where do we have to reassess if these tools still work, or what tools do we need now? So in the middle of all of that is when I became the executive director. So
I was going to say, because at the start of the pandemic, you were HR manager, I believe, right? And then
I was assistant director here.
Okay, got it. So one of the things I talked to a couple colleagues with, Lacey and Tony, we did a podcast on compassion fatigue. You have a unique perspective, because not only are you probably compassionate for your employees, you're also compassionate about the situation of your students. What did you do, or what are you still doing to take care of yourself as a leader? Because when all that weighs on you, I can only imagine what you bring home.
Yeah. Well, I could I could teach a class in compartmentalization. I mean, you
ever seen the show Severance? Maybe you do that a little bit.
I haven't seen it. I know about it.
It's incredible. You got to see it.
Yeah. So for me, there are a lot of things that I have to do to just kind of put this thing there. So when I am here, I need to fully be here. I need to be completely present. I need to be agile in my thinking. I need to be adaptable. I need to be receptive, all of those things. And I know that there's a lot on my shoulders here. There's a lot of things I'm responsible for. There's a lot of people, all the people I care about, the kids I care about. And then I have to get in the car and drive home. And I have 3 adopted kids with educational and neurological difference. And, I give myself a landmark on my drive home that I can stew and fret and worry about everything until that Chevron station. And then at that Chevron station, I have to turn on a podcast and I have to think about something completely different. And I will know that on my commute back in, at that Chevron station, I'm going to pick that stuff back up and start thinking about it again. And that's just one thing for me that I've had to really do. Now, at the time when I'm home, I have to make sure that I am taking care of my own mental health, acknowledging the maladaptive behaviors I have and trying to identify how to get out of those things, those patterns. Like I could go home and, well, the pandemic really brought to everyone's attention boxed wine. Great.
Yeah.
That's a lovely thing. But it's also a maladaptive behavior that,
Yeah,
like,
100%.
maybe I don't. Maybe I put the box away. Maybe I, think about what are the things that make me feel physically exhausted so I can get good sleep. So go and work out.
Yep.
Maybe I go for a walk, get out in the fresh air, let the rain hit me in the face, just experience all of those things that I know that aren't contributing to the mental load, but also contributing to physical and mental well-being. That's that. And then also acknowledging when I'm here, what things I actually can make progress and impact on. And I think when I was in the assistant director chair versus when I'm in this chair, there's a difference. I can make change now. I can, rather than supporting the direction of someone else, I can say, all right, I've been here for 13 years. I can identify our own patterns organizationally that are contributing to us staying in the same place in this area or this area. So what am I going to do? I'm going to own the things I can actually control. And I'm going to be really transparent about it. I'm going to be receptive and I'm going to do my best. And at the end of the day, I'm going to know I did everything I could to make progress in these areas. And I'm going to be okay with that.
Being in a nonprofit, I know that you're always resource constrained. And it's a constant probably battle between like, what do our people need? What do our students need? And then how do we go out getting the money for it? And then are we making sure we're using it in the right way? Like, how do you grapple with that? Like, that's a world that I don't quite live in, it being in the for-profit world. But I'm just curious because it's so mission driven. Like, how do you make sure that you're maximizing the resources you do have? And then how do you ask for what you need? I'm sure you report to a board.
Yeah. There's freedom and constraint in it, because there's freedom in the respect of we don't have to make huge profit margins. We don't need to like get X number of sales of widget above last year's widget sales or lattes or whatever.
That's the freedom.
There's not this pressure of like, oh, the shareholders need X number of floppy. That gives me life.
Yeah, it's exhausting. I'll tell you that. The just constant growth. I mean, I love it, but it's like different problem.
So yes. So for me, the constraint comes in. Okay, well, we have district tuition that the districts pay for students to come here. Families don't pay a dime, which is great. But that tuition doesn't cover everything. That tuition covers the basics, and as we all know, like the basics, they increase year over year. All services increase their rates, which they have to do because inflation is real and all of these things are real, and we live in a real capitalistic system that has that as part of our structure. So what we constantly are trying to do is figure out, okay, if we can cover the basics of our work, what else do our students need? What can be beneficial for our students? What will be beneficial for our staff? How do we find the resources to do that next thing? And so that's where that's where the heartburn comes in, right? So I know I have this much and the need is this much. So we constantly are going back to foundations. We're constantly trying to increase our donor base, which is really hard for an organization like Serendipity because, if we work for the Humane Society, everybody loves puppies and kittens. And there's no like traumatic damage you could do to that kitten to talk about their life before the Humane Society. We really hold a value of, we don't want to exploit our kids' stories at all. They have been through enough. So we have to walk that tightrope of, we need people to know about the work that we're doing, but we don't want to exploit what's going on here. So it's hard. It's hard to increase the knowledge of our program. It's hard to talk openly about what our kids experience. We don't want to, because they have experienced a lot. And at the same time, people need to know that they can contribute to this organization and this mission, because it's so vital and impacts so many people. if places like this didn't exist, then let me qualify my statement. I believe in full inclusion for kids. Like I really believe that if everything was working perfectly, then all of the systems would be available for all kids to be served in their home school districts with complete efficacy. The reality is that's not what we find ourselves in, and there are students that will need, as part of that continuum of care, different
Yeah.
different resources. And so that's why we exist. We don't exist to take kids and have them here forever. We want to give them the tools that they can have to be successful back in their home schools. Because we exist, classrooms in school districts are less disruptive, because there are kids that need more, that if they were in that classroom, it would take away from the resources of the teacher, take away from the resources of the rest of the students. And sometimes those students need a different experience to be able to get to the place where they can come back and be part of that community. So the impact is more than just the kids that we serve here. The impact is them, to their long-term outcomes, to their families. I mean, as a parent of a child that experiences struggle, how hard it is when you get that phone call from school. How hard it is.
Plenty of those.
Yeah, same. And yeah, so the impact of the work that we do just extends throughout the community, throughout families, throughout long-term outcomes for our students. And so this is a very long answer to a short question, but we need more people to know about what we do. We need more people to connect with their corporate social responsibility places in their work and say like, hey, I'm going to do this donation and please match it. And we need people to sponsor us for different things. We need awareness of the work that we do without people having access to the stories of our kids.
I know. Yeah, that's why I didn't ask you anything specific about the kids, because it's private. It's their story, and it's not for wider consumption. I really
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
There are some families that do want to talk about it, and if you go to our website, there are several student stories that we've had videos made where you can see the impact on families and kids, and so that's great. If they want to share their stories, absolutely shout it from the rooftops. Yeah. But yeah, you're exactly right. Their stories are theirs, not ours.
Well, Matty, I got to let you go. I know you got to get back to the kids and your staff. I kept you a little bit longer than I anticipated, but honestly, I could keep going for a couple hours. You're a wealth of knowledge. Your heart is in this work, and I appreciate what you do, because it is. You're absolutely right. The work that you're doing is making, and your team is making an impact at the society level, not just the school and those kids. It does have a wider impact. So thank you for sharing all that you shared. Where can people connect with you or learn more about you, Serendipity?
Sure. Yeah, you can go to our website, www.serendipitycenter.org. We have an annual gala coming up on May 2nd. I hope that date is right. Where you could come and purchase a ticket. It's called Shining Stars, and learn more about our therapeutic program. It's the 10th anniversary of our therapeutic farm on our campus. We're going to be doing a lot of fun things there. Yeah, you can reach out directly. I am happy to talk about the work that we do. We always need people to serve in some capacity, like on a board level, or just share information about what we're doing. Yeah, any one of those ways. I'm not particularly interesting. The agency's great. Nobody needs to I don't know. I'd love to share about the work, but you're getting a sense of me right now. So if you want to hear a rambling conversation about child-informed care, I'm happy to have coffee with anybody and talk about how they can contribute to this mission in whatever way that they have ability. But yeah, go to the website. It's a great one.
My guest today has been Matty Berryessa, the Executive Director of Serendipity Center. Matty, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really been a pleasure to connect.